Welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to talk about how to use Lightroom and give a beginner's guide. This is going to be super easy and simple. We're going to talk about how to make a catalogue, import pictures, edit them, and then export them. So let's not waste any time and dive right in. Go ahead and open up Lightroom. If you've been using Lightroom before, then it might look a bit like this. But so that we can keep things clean and organized, we'll go up to File, New Catalogue, and we'll make a new catalogue. Now, I like to work off my external hard drive just to keep things nice and organized, and also to keep my piece of computer running as fast as possible. So we'll just save something here, and now it will open up our new catalogue. Now that our catalogue is set up, we can go on to importing our photos. If you look here on the top right, you can see there's a few different modules. We're only going to focus on the library one and the develop one. You can forget about the rest. We'll come down here and click on import, and we're going to find where our pictures are. So mine's on my external hard drive. Now if you've got lots of photos, you can double click on one of them and then scroll through them using the arrow keys and press P to select them. As I've only got 3, I'll go ahead and import all 3. Just before I do that though, I'll come here over to the right hand side, and I like to add it to a collection just to keep things nice and neat. And we'll set that as our target collection so everything comes into there. And then go ahead and hit import. And there we go, our pictures have finally appeared, and now we can do the fun stuff. Now to edit these pictures, we're going to have to come back up here to the top right, and this time we can select the develop module. Now it's important to say that these were raw files, which means that they capture a lot more detail, but immediately they don't necessarily look that impressive. But the advantage is there's so much more detail you have in your shot that you can really make good edits. You can of course do this with JPEGs as well, but be wary that you won't be able to do the same kind of quality of editing that you can with the raw files. Now on the right hand side, you've got your basic panel with loads of sliders to mess around with. Your tone curve, ways to change colours of different things, making your pictures look sharper, as well as some colourful effects that we can play with. If you're just starting out, the best thing to do is mess around with these sliders and pull them from one side to the other just to see what's actually happening. Or if you want, you can hit the auto button and let that do it for you. But we're going to mess around with things a little bit. Right off the bat, I can see that this image is underexposed. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring up the exposure just so I can see a little bit more. And that looks already much better. Now, one thing I've noticed is that this has got a very cool tone to it. I'm just going to warm it up a little bit. Now that we've brought up the exposure, you can see that the sky is now blown out. So we can bring back some details by pulling back the highlight slider. And there you go, you can just start beginning to see some clouds in the sky. Now in this case, the subject, who happens to be my brother, is still a little bit dark. So I'm going to just lift the shadows a little bit just to see how that looks. And there we go. And we can see that we can finally see his face. I'm going to leave the whites where they are, but I want to add a bit more contrast. So I'm going to just pull down the blacks a little bit to make that jacket of his a bit darker. Now I'm going to increase the clarity a little bit, not too much. You want to keep your edits subtle, otherwise it looks overly processed and people can tell that you've just played around with the sliders way too much. Add a bit more dehaze just to bring a little bit of detail back in the sky. Now we're going to move down to the tone curve. I'm going to click this button over here because this gives me a bit more freedom in terms of how many points I'm going to place. This looks daunting, but to keep it very basic. So at the bottom here you've got the shadows, at the top here you've got the highlights, and everywhere in between is the midtones. We're going to make 4 points. Some people make an S-curve, which means you take the shadows and you drop them down a little bit, and that immediately darkens the shadows and gives you more contrast, and you lift up the highlights. If you make a mistake, you can just double click on the point and that point goes back to its original position. And I'm going to take the blacks and just lift them up a little bit. It gives it this slight fade, which I quite like. I'm not going to mess with any of the colors. Now, I don't want sharpening to the whole picture. I just want it to the kind of outline. The way you do that is you can hold Alt on your keyboard, grab the masking slider, and as you drag it, you can start seeing which part of the image is being sharpened. So I want to mask it all the way up to there, and that way just the outlines are sharp. Lightroom's already automatically enabled my profile correction, so if we turn that off, you can see what it looks like, and you can see there's a natural vignette, and the picture is a little bit distorted, but if we turn that on, it automatically corrects itself. Now, I normally tick this box, which is remove chromatic aberration, and to best describe it, I'll zoom in here. In areas of high contrast between light and dark, you can see there's this kind of pink fringing and green fringing, which doesn't look that nice. The best way to get rid of it is to normally tick the box, and we can see in this instance, it's done absolutely nothing. But another way of removing it is by clicking on the manual button here, grabbing the dropper, and then choosing the green part, and then you can see that the green part's already gone, and then we can do the same with the kind of purple part. And then already you can see that's much better. I'm going to add a slight vignette because I like the way that looks. I like to increase the feather. That just means that the effect is a little bit more subtle. And I'm quite happy with the way that looks. Let's do a before and after. Now let's move on to our next image. This is a long exposure I took of Tower Bridge. And this is where you'll really see how powerful raw images can be. Now again, we can clearly see that this is underexposed and it's just way too dark. So I'm going to take the exposure up just a little bit. Now the difference between vibrance and saturation is that saturation applies to all colours, whereas vibrance only applies to colours that are already muted. Now I am going to play around with the colours here because I quite like cool blue tones for long exposure night shots. Up here at the top you've got different tools. You've got the crop tool, you've got the spot removal tool, you've got some filters that you can use just to edit certain parts of your picture. I put in a gradient filter on the right hand side. So I'm just going to darken this side a little bit. If you hit O on your keyboard, it shows you exactly which area of the image is being impacted. And there we go. Now moving on to our last image. I'm going to crop this with the rule of thirds where the subject lies on the intersection of one of the thirds, and I think that looks good, so I'm happy with that. Once you're happy with the way your pictures look, you can export them. So select the ones you want to export, go to export, and it'll bring up this little pop-up. You can choose where you want to save it. Once you've chosen where to export them, come down, change the quality to 100 and hit export. And there you have it, you're done. That's it for today. Hope you found that useful. Like and subscribe, comment down below if there was anything you think I missed out, and I'll see you in the next one.